views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
All right, well, coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, when it comes to protecting our citizens, police officers are front and center. We immediately affiliate law enforcement with our safety, but with national headlines and news reports surfacing about police brutality in the community, many citizens have begun to doubt whether today's law enforcement can rebound from poor reviews. And maybe those reviews are not warranted. Well, tonight we will sit down with a civil rights attorney who will discuss the issue from both sides. Also, we will take a look at an event that brought the community together during a tragedy. As you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. All right, hello, and welcome to Today's Verdict, the live and interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet us at Today's Verdict and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. Also, make sure to like us and follow us on Facebook at Today's Verdict, and check us out at bronxnet.tv/Bronx Legal. And last, but certainly not least, don't forget to tweet me at Today's Verdict. Both national and local law enforcement have not been getting great press as of late. With instances of police brutality in the news, we at Today's Verdict thought the topic should be revisited. Well, joining us today to help us get a better understanding is civil rights attorney Michael Lamonsoff. Michael, it's great to have you back.
David, thanks for having me.
We missed you. Is it me, or since the time that you've been here, it looks like every other news article and every other news report seems to be about some type of police brutality nationally or locally?
No, it's not you. I believe that the amount of police brutality cases, false arrest cases, false imprisonment cases, wrongful conviction cases have definitely proliferated in the last years.
Now, I think we talked a little bit offset. I have an opinion.
Sure.
I think it's the cell phones, and I think it's the dash cams on the police cars, and I also think it's social media. And if you didn't have those three things, I think many of the community wouldn't really even know this was happening. True or false? What do you think?
I think that you're right in a way. I think that's definitely true. But I also think that we're experiencing a surge because our police are not being trained correctly. I think there's a lack of community outreach. I think that there's also a problem with gun control in this country. So I think you add all these variables up and you can end up with a lot more problems in police abuse cases.
And I completely agree. I just said without the cameras on them, maybe this was always happening. Do you think that's true, or do you think this is just really a new development?
A lot of these things have been happening, but with the cameras, they're not as useful as you think they are. A lot of times what happens is people videotape what's happening with their cell phones, with their iPhones, whatever phones they have. And what happens is that when the police see this, there are some bad apples. They'll take that cell phone, they'll take that iPhone, they'll take whatever they're videotaping with, and they'll take it and they'll throw it out, or they'll confiscate it, and then they'll add a charge to that person who's actually videotaping, who's doing this, and they'll charge them with obstruction of governmental justice.
Wow. All right, let's back up for a second.
Sure.
Let's talk about, the average person on the street gets picked up for, petty larceny, whatever you want to say. Mm-hmm. Tell me what is the procedure that usually should be followed when an officer comes and tries to ask you some questions, wants to arrest you, wants to ask you questions. How does it usually flow? Let's start with that.
Let's first take the side of the person who's being approached.
Fine.
Okay. So what really should happen is, first of all, in order for a policeman to come and talk to you for any reason, okay, he's got to have reason to do that, okay? He's got to have some reasonable cause to come to that person and approach that person in the first place. The person who he's approaching really has constitutional rights and has a right to say no. I'm doing nothing wrong. And there's no reason for me to answer to your questions. But in reality, what that person should do on the person who's being approached side should cooperate with the policeman.
And why is that?
The reason is because what's going to happen is, if it's a bad cop, if it's a cop, I'm not saying that all policemen are bad. We have, New York has probably the finest police department in the United States. But just like in every group, there's always going to be some bad apples. And so if a policeman approaches somebody and that person doesn't respond the way the policeman wants him to respond, what's going to happen is that policeman is going to either arrest him or trump up charges. I'm talking about the bad apples, not everybody. And bring that person in on trumped up charges and have that person falsely arrested.
I remember when I was in law school, my criminal law professor, he lectured and he basically said, if a police officer goes over to you and asks you to open your trunk, and he doesn't have the right to, open your trunk. Because if there's nothing in the trunk, it's not going to be a problem. Because if you don't open the trunk, a bad police officer may walk to the side of the car and drop something in a car, and next thing you know, you got a real problem. So if you didn't do anything wrong, cooperate. If there's nothing in the trunk, open the trunk. In other words, so I always, that always bothered me because I felt, well, why should I have to do something that doesn't seem to jive with my constitutional rights? But you know what? If it prevents a problem, which always escalates, you're right. Cooperate. Just that's what I think you should do.
The problem also is in training. Policemen are not trained in de-escalation. They're trained, the natural feeling that a policeman may have is to escalate a problem because they're in a position of authority and they don't like somebody who's objecting to that authority. So suddenly they're escalating the situation and an arrest can happen that shouldn't happen to begin with. And suddenly they have to justify it because they've arrested that person and they can't look bad to the police force, and they have to protect themselves, and suddenly there's a trumped up charge.
Now you've seen a lot of false arrest cases in your office. I know that
Hundreds.
That's what you do. Is it basically that it's a takedown that's too hard? Is it the handcuffs too tight? Is it beating up the perp?
Are you talking about false arrest or excessive force?
Let's start with excessive force.
Okay.
Okay. What do you usually see?
We can see a lot of different things. First of all, if the policeman thinks he's not being observed, okay, I'm talking about bad police officers.
Right.
Again, I want to say that not all policemen are bad.
Completely
We're
agree.
talking about the bad ones.
Right.
Okay?
But then we're here talking about a lot of the bad ones, and that's what
Right.
we're talking about here.
Okay. What they will do is they will handcuff people way too tight. I have people come into my office with nerve damage to their hands and to their wrists, obviously. I have people that have actually been beaten up in the back of police cars. I have people that have been beaten up in police precincts. We have plenty of excessive force cases, and they usually when the police think that they're not being observed by others. They think that they're just not. So the person who's being approached by a policeman, I think the most important thing to do really is to call that policeman by his name. Say Patrolman, Police Officer Johnson, Police Officer Smith, because once you identify somebody, they know they're identified. Okay, because a person may think that they're protected because they have an iPhone or some kind of video going on, or friends videotaping everything going on, but that videotape can be disposed of very easily by a bad cop, very easily.
Now, excessive force is really a term of art, legal action. Excessive force, but that person now could very well be falsely arrested, which is another term of art, legal definition.
That's correct.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about false arrest.
Okay.
What goes on there, and what kind of lawsuit would you have for a false arrest case, let's say?
Oh, okay. Well, what happens with a false arrest is when a policeman feels that somebody is doing something wrong.
Okay.
And that person's doing nothing wrong. What they may do is they may approach somebody without cause, without reasonable cause, and start talking to that person, trying to find out information, like your example where the policeman approached you at the car.
Right.
And what happens is, because they're not taught to de-escalate a situation, some people may escalate it a little bit and say, wait a second, I don't want to be bothered by this police officer. Why are you bothering me? I'm just walking down the street. And it escalates. The policeman doesn't de-escalated because he's not trained in de-escalation. Now he feels that he's got to arrest that person, and many times the person's falsely arrested for some false trumped-up charge.
Okay. And we have an action.
And run through the system for 24 hours or more.
Which leads to false imprisonment.
Which leads to false imprisonment,
Okay,
correct.
which means you're put in jail. Now, do you always take a case based on the arrest or false arrest or the false imprisonment? Do you say, well, somebody should have been in jail for at least a day or 2 days? Or is it just, depends on the situation?
If there is no reasonable cause if there's no reasonable cause for the arrest, that's enough for us. We take the case. And we bring the lawsuits in federal court against the city.
Because if another attorney might say, well, you spent a night in jail, what's the big deal? Oh, you were falsely arrested, it was dismissed. But no, it means a lot to somebody to have their action taken seriously. And just because you didn't spend a night in jail or it was only one night in jail doesn't mean you don't have a right to a lawsuit.
And take it one step further, David. The one thing that's the most important to every one of us is our liberty. Think about that. Your liberty is stolen from you for 24 hours or more. That's a violation that's inexcusable for no reason.
Let's back up. We don't have much time if we have to take a break. But we didn't talk about, and because we're still in the process of actually arresting somebody, let's talk about illegal search and seizure.
Sure.
Talk about that a little bit. That's protected by the Constitution, you know that. But is it because they're getting too frisky? What do you mean?
Well, again, what happens with illegal search and seizures, you have police officers that are not trained correctly, and what they will do in many situations is they'll escalate, and they'll go into somebody's home where they shouldn't be. And they'll say that they have reasonable cause when they don't have reasonable cause to go into somebody's apartment. Or they'll approach somebody and they'll say, okay, I have reasonable cause to think, or they'll make it up later on, and they'll just escalate the situation. And then that person becomes subject to an illegal search and seizure.
Okay, we got a lot more to cover, but we have to take a break. All right, and continuing with our topic, elected officials and police enforcement rallied together for a national night out against crime. The purpose was to bring the community closer together, always a good thing. Well, Veronica Guiti has the story.
Tonight, the 52nd Precinct took time out of their schedule to host the 33rd Annual National Night Out Against Crime.
It's an event that is citywide where the community is able to meet with the officers in their neighborhood in a fun-filled environment. There are booths filled with information, games, and food for the young and young at heart. In light of the recent shootings, tensions are high with cops, and organizers say that right now, this is exactly the type of event that is needed.
National Night Out is a night against crime. Here's a night where people should be able to come and enjoy themselves, and also meet and greet the new officers and the commander, and also meet people in the community. And it's just another way that the council works on trying to enhance the relationship.
I'm really excited about this event, the National Night Out, because it brings our community together. We have unity. You have people from all kinds of backgrounds. And then we have the men and the women in blue with our community. We need each other. We can't work without each other.
Most importantly is to bridge that gap between the community and the police department. I think we've came a lot closer in the events that officers had to go through our country and the sacrifice that they paid. And I think I want to establish that understanding that their work is appreciated.
Bronx DA Darcel Clark has made it her goal to get more guns off the street and encourage those in attendance to participate in a gun buyout where they could turn in their guns with no questions asked.
Guns are causing death and destruction in our community, and one way to stop it is to get rid of the guns. So this is a great opportunity for people to turn them in. Between the shootings, accidental shooting, kids picking up guns in their home, getting shot, suicides. This is a prevention measure that goes miles.
Well, I hope that in September, when they see the advertisements about a meeting or something else that we're doing, that they will come and participate, but especially come to our meetings. Our meetings take place every fourth Thursday of the month from 7 to 9. And that's where they can come and share their information, and where they can also come and speak to officers or any particular unit that they may be interested in.
Events like this are just a small step in trying to reach a solution. Get involved with your community leaders, and you too can be making a difference. For BronxNet, I'm Veronica Guiti.
All right, well, we have to take a quick break, but don't worry, we will be back with more Today's Verdict right after this.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
Adopting a new pet is a rewarding experience. And shelter pets make super pets. Your new best friend will steal your heart, bring you happiness, and enrich your life for years to come. You can make a difference in the life of an animal. Adopt and bring home a shelter pet today. To find out more, visit theshelterpetproject.org.
Hello, good people of the Bronx and beyond. Welcome to A Life in Art.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
Welcome back to Today's Verdict. I'm your host, David Lesh. We are always encouraging you to stay connected. Tweet us at Today's Verdict. We will continue our discussion with civil rights attorney Michael Lavinshoff. Michael, the mayor of New York City, I'm sure, has an opinion as to the police situation and false arrests and false imprisonments. And what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are these. All right, what happened with this mayor is that his judgment is really skewed. He came out when he was elected and he said many, many bad things about the police force, and he alienated the police who are there to serve and protect all of us. Made them so alienated that, I don't know if you remember at a funeral of a couple of police officers, they turned their back on him.
I do remember that.
So what's happened is he's trying to curry favor and pander back to them because they really don't like them. The average cop on a beat will tell you that they feel disenfranchised by the city because of this mayor. They feel that they're not appreciated, and it makes them angrier. And maybe that's why we're seeing all of these problems that we have in New York with false arrest and excessive force.
Could be.
So what's happening is this mayor has decided that instead of settling cases where people have been falsely arrested and abused, or have had excessive force, have excessively been, they've been subject to police brutality. Instead of settling these cases, he's litigating these cases, protecting the police off the bad apples. And that's what's happening.
So they think, so the police officers are thinking, oh wow, this mayor really may actually like me because he's litigating this case, in every case in the city whenever somebody brings a police brutality case. When the truth of the matter is he's just really currying favor to the police officers, and these cases should be settled because they shouldn't have to go to trial and waste everybody's time. The judicial system is loaded with so many different types of cases, and if the city is wrong, the city should be paying money on the cases and not necessarily forcing everybody to go to trial, but obviously that's not what's happening.
Well, let's take it a step further to more of an organized situation. It's really the PBA that he's trying to cover favor from, okay? He's alienated the entire police force of Manhattan, of New York City. Okay, he's alienated them. So the only thing that he can do, because he's alienated them so much, is to say, okay, I'm going to defend police officers. I'm going to defend every single police officer that has been accused of some type of police abuse, whether it be false arrest, whether it be some type of excessive force case. I'm going to defend them. We're going to hire more lawyers, more defense lawyers, and we're going to defend all these cases. And he's going to say, turn to the PBAs and say, look what I'm doing. Look what I'm doing. I'm defending all you guys. You guys should like me again, right?
Yeah.
You hated me to begin with, but now I'm defending you. There's a major problem with that.
By the way, the public should know that when we're bringing these, or you're bringing these actions for false arrest, false imprisonment, there's a notice of claim here, right? There's a condition precedent before even bringing the lawsuit.
Well, notice of claim assumes that we bring it in state court.
Well, that's a good point. I'm sorry about that. Well, so these cases, are they just state cases or are they federal cases or both?
They're both.
All right.
Okay. They're not, well, they're both, but you can choose your venue.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people out there that think that they're state cases and you can only bring them with a notice of claim, which is 90 days, statute of limitations, and the statute of limitations that exists for the city municipality, which is a year and 90 days, right? So there's a problem because what they don't know is that that abuse that they were a victim of 2.5 years ago can still be brought in federal court. The proper place to bring these cases, every one of these cases, is the federal court and not in the state court. And the reason for it is because a state court could take years and years and years and they poo-poo these cases, and they're also in some way patrons of the city, the judges I'm talking about.
But the federal judges, you feel, take them much more seriously.
The federal judges take them very seriously, and the cases move along far faster.
Do clients know this when they come to you, or they have no idea that they could bring a federal case?
A lot of people don't know that they still have a case if they were abused 2-3 years ago. In other words, they think it's over because they think that the statute of limitations precludes them, stops them from bringing actions.
Listen, I have to put the other hat on for a second,
Go.
okay? I'm a defense attorney. I'm going to put on some, I'm going to put a couple of defenses. What's my defense to some of to false arrest, false imprisonment? Is it that, hey, that your plaintiff was aggressive with us first? Your guy has a record. I don't know. What do you see as the main defense that you end up coming up against that you really have to tackle? Do you see anything more often than not?
Yeah, it's called BS.
All right, that's fair.
That's what it's called, BS. All right, what they do is, I'm talking about the bad apples again. I must come back and say that that we have a great police department here, but there are some bad apples.
So they turn it back against your client. Really?
They lie. They absolutely lie. And for some reason, these bad apples always end up being the worst witnesses because they have a sense of entitlement. They have a sense that they're above the law in some way. So when you start questioning them, they become very angry, especially the bad ones. The bad ones have a machismo. I can only describe it as a machismo. So when you start questioning them, they start to break down because they're not used to being questioned.
Let me ask you a question. The stop and frisk, which doesn't
is illegal.
Illegal. Doesn't exist anymore.
It does in some other ways, but go ahead.
But did that really put a dent in the police ability to be able to find if somebody did a crime? Does that create an unhappy police officer?
So from the police side, of course it does, and it creates anger in them because they feel that their hands are tied and they can't do what they need to do. Sometimes, there are people out there that need to be arrested. There are people out there that commit crimes, and the police are there to serve and protect us. So sometimes the police feel that their hands are tied and they can't do anything about it. The problem is that what happens because stop and frisk have been made illegal, the police have figured out how to get around that. And so there's not been a change in the amount of arrests because of that. Stop and frisk has not stopped arrest, or false arrests rather, have not stopped that at all.
I can't ask you to change policy because we don't really know. You're not a politician. We don't really want to bring that up in terms of what you would do to change policy. But I will ask you this. What tips would you give now to somebody? You gave a few tips in terms of, don't talk back to cooperate with the police officer and make sure you get his name. What else? What would you say to somebody who's watching now and they know that their son or daughter has been, out later at night, and sometimes police officers seem to hover around looking for maybe to see if there's been any problems? What advice would you give to that parent?
I'm going to come back to that question, but I want to go back to the politician. I'm not a politician.
No, I know you.
You're right, I'm not.
Right.
But I do have some suggestions that any citizen can take a look at and see what's going on
Give me
here.
a top 2.
Top 3.
Top 3.
A, okay, stop hiring lawyers to defend these cases. These cops are guilty.
Okay.
These police officers are guilty. Stop with the defending of these cases. All right, stop that.
No, it's because they're
Take the
wasting
money
and use it for something
Take the
else.
money and put it into training of police officers in firearm usage, especially the discharge of their weapons.
Okay.
More training and much more community outreach. I mean, I don't understand the police officers in these communities don't even know the communities that they're working in. There's no money being spent on that. This mayor doesn't know what he's doing. He's putting it towards defending the police officers, the bad cops, rather than putting the money into where it should be, which is training cops how to discharge their weapons if and when they have to. I have a case that happened a few years ago, the Empire State Shooting. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah, there was 2 cops. They shot and killed a perp who had just executed somebody on the street. But guess what? 16 people were injured by by those bullets, by free bullets that were flying everywhere. And those 2 cops that brought down the perp by killing him and also wounded 16 other people had the same training that a police officer out in Suffolk County would have.
Yeah, sure.
Now, those cops were in the busiest part of Manhattan, one of the most densely populated places in the world, in the most densely populated part of Manhattan, and discharged their weapons. They're not being trained properly. Stop defending these cases, start training the cops, and get back to the communities and have the policemen trained to understand the communities that they're working in and have some community outreach. Stop spending so much money on these defense of these cases, because we're going to beat them anyway.
You might be the most passionate guest we've had this year.
We'll beat them. We're going to beat them every single time.
But unfortunately, we got to stop.
All right.
All right. Take a breather. Well, that's all the time we have for tonight. I'd like to thank our guest for joining us, and of course you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out at www.bronxnet.tv. Also remember, if there is a legal issue or topic you would like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at davidlesh@bronxnet.org or tweet us at Today's Verdict, and make sure to hashtag Ask Today's Verdict. For myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach your verdict. I'm David Lesh, and we will see you again in 2 weeks with an all-new episode right here. Take care.
Sorry, Dave, I destroyed your